Hey, what's up, everybody? So coming to you again. This one is a new video I'm coming out with, and it is my pound for pound top 5 fighters in boxing. I know I did my 2020 year-end top 10s. I've never really done a pound for pound list of my own pound for pound list. You know, I always know who I feel is the top guy pound for pound. I might have my own like top 3 running in my head, but I never come out with the full-on top 5 and explanation. And I don't think top 10 really matters. If you're in the pound for pound rankings, I think top 5 is the most that I will do, because what's the point of being in the top 10? You are very far off unless you fight one of the other guys, and we're talking about every weight in boxing. So what are the odds that it's not great odds that you're going to see 2 pound for pound guys fighting? So, you know, when those fights kind of happen, that, you know, it's a big deal. So, I mean, sometimes it happens, you know. I'm not saying it doesn't happen at all, but I just think top 5 pound for pound matters. And pound for pound, the way I look at it is because people view it differently. There's some people, like I've heard Max Kellerman say, pound for pound for him is, and I might be misquoting him now, but it was a few years ago. Who do you think is the best fighter right now in terms of, like, if you got in the ring with them right now? I think that's part of it. But how do you get to that status without what you've done already, you know? And, you know, that's the thing, is I base your resume off of that. So there's guys on this list that you're like, well, he didn't even have a big win recently. But what if his resume is good? What if he's been dominating? What if he took over a whole division and moved up in weight? You know, I mean, that kind of shit matters, guys. It does. And so that's probably going to throw some people off with my top 5. But, hey, it is what it is. I don't think you can argue that any one of these guys isn't at least a top 10 pound-for-pound fighter. But, you know, I really took some time to think about it. I've been planning on doing this the last few months. And I finally came up with a top 5 in December and decided to put it out there once I was done with my year-end top 10s. So this is my top 5 pound for pound heading into 2021. And I'm going to keep it updated as I do my top 10s also. You know, the same thing. So, hey, real quick though, again, guys, if you like my page, you like my channel, please hit the thumbs up. If you don't like it, hit the thumbs down. Comment. Whatever kind of love, I appreciate. If you haven't seen my stuff, please go and subscribe to my channel. I got a lot of different videos that I do, and I do them on a regular basis. I try to do videos at least every other day, you know, recently especially, but I'm at least on here 2-3 times a week talking about everything. I got my own podcast, the Standing 8 Count podcast, with my boy Ray Riz and my boy Von Blue, and I'd really appreciate it if you guys tuned into that. We do it about once a week, and then I release the podcast on here. All that being said, let's get into the pound-for-pound top 5 for me, True Boxing. We start with number 5, and that is the undefeated and former undisputed cruiserweight champion, Oleksandr Usyk of the Ukraine. This guy is currently a heavyweight. I actually have him in the heavyweight division. He doesn't even break my top 5. He's number 6, I believe, at heavyweight. But it's really from a top to bottom what he's done type thing. Usyk, you know, just 2 short years ago became, I believe, I want to say he's only the 4th man to become an undisputed world champion for all 4 governing belts that have been around since the early 90s now, since we've had 4 titles. Usyk became like I said, I believe he's only the 4th man in history to unify all 4 belts in one weight class. And he did it in a tournament format. The World Boxing Super Series set up a tournament. It truly had I want to say they had 5 of the best 8 cruiserweights in the world, and they had the top 4. And he competed in that. He entered as the number 1 seed and as the favorite. And he went in and he beat Marco Huck in the first round, who was a former champion at cruiserweight, former number 1 fighter at cruiserweight for a while. For a couple of years there, he was dominant. You know, I I think Marco Huck had made like 12, 13 title defenses. You know, he was a good-ass champion for a while, for a few years. And Usyk knocked him out, stopped him in 10. Although Huck was past it at that point, Usyk dominated him and stopped him. Semifinals, he got tested. He took on Maris Briedis, who just went on to win the World Boxing Super Series Season 2 this past September. You know, he went toe-to-toe in Briedis' home country and beat him by a close-ass majority decision in a really, really great fight in the semifinals. That allowed Usyk to unify belts, and Briedis still, that's his only loss. And the fact that he went on to win the World Boxing Super Series only made Usyk's resume better. And then in the finals, he took on Murat Gassiev, dominated him. One-sided 12-round unanimous decision to become the undisputed cruiserweight champion. And if that wasn't enough, just 4 short months later, he took on veteran Tony Bellew, who had moved up to heavyweight to beat David Haye twice, came back down to cruiserweight, and he put it on Bellew in Bellew's home country of England. He just dominated him, you know, and actually Bellew was competitive, but Usyk was on it. Stopped him in the 8th round impressively and held on to the undisputed title. And then he decided to make his move to the heavyweight division in 2019. Injuries kept him out till October. Took on, I think it was Chaz Witherspoon, and dominated him to a 7th round TKO. Wasn't that impressive, but it was his debut at heavyweight. And then he, from there, this past October, he took on Derek Chisora and outworked him over 12 rounds. Chisora is always a game heavyweight, solid-ass heavyweight, and Usyk is still the world champion. Now, prior to the World Boxing Super Series tournament, Usyk beat Krzysztof Glowacki, who's still a top 10 cruiserweight and fighting for a title next. He dominated him to win the title. So this guy's got some really good major wins, all in the past 3-4 years. He has just been at the peak. And for me, becoming an undisputed champion and beating the best in the division, that proves a lot. And, you know, Usyk has done that the last couple of years, and he's got opportunity to move up the pound-for-pound rankings this year coming up. He's likely going to fight Joe Joyce next for the interim title, while Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury fight it out. He's a #1 contender to Joshua. So that's a big deal right there, you know. A win over Joe Joyce is going to keep him in the top 5. And then if he gets the winner of Fury and Joshua at some point, and becomes a heavyweight champion, he's definitely going to move up, in my opinion. So Usyk, I don't think he beats Fury or Joshua just off of size, but he's definitely got the skill to stay in those fights. And I can't wait to see what he does in 2021. I don't want to hear, though, people going, we didn't even make the top 5 heavyweights. Why is he top 5 pound for pound? Because it's not just about one division. It's where you at across all the divisions. He hasn't proven himself at heavyweight yet. He's only beaten one credible fighter and not even a top 10 guy. But overall, between cruiserweight and heavyweight, he's dominated and been great. So, and done very well against big name fighters. And that's pound for pound type shit. And that ain't the only time I'm going to say that in this video. Okay, number 4, pound for pound, for me, the former unified and 2-time middleweight champion of the world, and actually the current reigning 2-time middleweight champion of the world, Triple G Gennady Golovkin. You know, Triple G, people have forgotten about this man, and they just look at him as the name of Triple G, but they're not looking at him in fear anymore, and they really should. Triple G, even though he's 38, this dude can still fight and still get it on. And just 2 short years ago, when he was 36, he went to war with the pound-for-pound king, Canelo Alvarez. And just 3 short years ago, when he's 35, most people feel he beat Canelo, you know, in their first fight. You know, I thought it was a draw, but damn, still. The following year, he loses a razor-thin decision to Canelo in a fight that still a lot of people thought he won. He actually outlanded Canelo in the second fight. He came up short. Only loss of his career was a razor-thin loss. And, you know, I think because of the fight with Derevyanchenko, people write him off, and I don't get it. Triple G shut down middleweight and dominated people. Daniel Jacobs on his resume. Prior to that, he destroyed David Lemieux. I can't even tell you all the legitimate middleweight fighters he fought and kicked the shit out of prior to that aren't big names but were legit fighters. And for me, he's sitting right here because of his performance 2 years ago against the current pound-for-pound best fighter in boxing. And Canelo pretty much rose to that distinction when he beat Kovalev in November of 2019. So that was just a year and some change removed from the Triple G fight. And Canelo is being talked about as pound for pound. So that shows you, and especially since then, Canelo has not been tested, really. Danny Jacobs, somewhat of a close fight. Canelo, controlled the tempo, outworked him, outboxed him, no doubt that he won. He knocked Kovalev out. Clean. Dominated Callum Smith. And Canelo looked great against Triple G, but Triple G still almost beat him. To me, that says a lot. And Triple G came back against a guy that he should have dominated in his last one, his mandatory, and destroyed him. Triple G is still the man, guys. And at some point, and I hope this happens, Triple G and Canelo are going to have to see each other again one more time. And I don't give a fuck how old Triple G is. Canelo needs to get that fight in. He needs to fight him again. And Triple G, at his age, he needs to continue to look good, and he will, in my opinion. They're talking right now about Triple G and Jaime Munguia, middleweight title. I'm sorry, I like Munguia. I think Triple G still beats him, and I think he's going to beat him clean if they fight. That happens for Triple G. He can make his move up to super middle if he wants. He can stay here, try to unify against Ryota Murata. He's got a lot of options that he can take while he waits around for Canelo and possibly fighting him September of this year or next year. And I think Triple G just needs to keep himself in there by fighting big-name fighters. The zone is going to push for him to fight big names because the first 3 fights of his contract have not been against big names, and he's getting paid over $16 million a fight. So Triple G's going to get the push by his network. He needs to get the opponents. He needs to kick their ass. And I still think there's only a few fighters that can seriously compete with Triple G. And even fewer fighters, maybe only 1 or 2. Canelo's one of them that could actually beat Triple G. So we're going to see. Triple G is going to make a bounce back this year, in my opinion, and prove why he is still one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the world. And you could even argue, if you thought he beat Canelo, that he deserves to be in that top spot. So it's all up for debate, but that's Triple G, number 4. Number 3, pound-for-pound, and here's where people are going to really get crazy. I got undefeated Errol Spence Jr. at number 3, the unified welterweight champion of the world. And actually, they're not going to get crazy about this. I don't think anybody argues Errol Spence is top 5. It's the next one we're going to argue. So Errol Spence, to me, is the number 1 welterweight in the world right now. He's earned that right. I base a lot of pound for pound, but overall, my top 10s on your last 3 years and what you've done in your last 3 years. Of course, your overall resume matters. Of course it does. But your last 3 years show what kind of fighter you've been recently. And that's most of the time for a lot of these fighters, that's their last 4 or 5 or 6 fights is the last 3 years. So I think that's fair. Your last 5 fights really should define the kind of fighter you are. Errol Spence has just been dominant the last 3 to 4 years. You reach back to May of 17 when he beat Kell Brook. Then January of 18. So let's go the last 3 years straight. Dominated Lamont Peterson, Destroyed a little-known Carlos Ocampo. First round knockout over a nobody, though. That's the kind of fight you need. Then he went on to beat, who is it after that? He beat Mikey Garcia and Sean Porter in 2019. Dominated Mikey Garcia in a fight that I was surprised that people thought Garcia was going to compete. He dominated Mikey, almost stopped him, probably should have stopped him, and played a little nice with him. Then then he took on Sean Porter and got tested. Really got tested in that fight, weathered the storm, knocked Porter down late in the fight, and walked away with a split decision, but unified belts in the best division in boxing. And that was his shot towards the top right there. I had him tied with Terrence Crawford after that, but he moved ahead at welterweight over Terrence Crawford this year, or in 2020, when he dominated Danny Garcia over 12 rounds. Some rounds were competitive, but overall he dominated. I gave him 10, 11 rounds. The unified champion, no doubt. This next year, it's up to, there's a couple things brewing on his big fights. Personally, next, I'm predicting he's going to fight Sean Porter in a rematch. I think he wants to leave, no doubt. Sean Porter's the #1 contender. Easy fight to make. PBC all the way right here. I think he's fighting Porter next. The other fights on the radar that people want to see for him. Manny Pacquiao. Pacquiao's got to want that fight. Pacquiao still holds the name, and it's up to him if he wants that fight. It's very easy to make if he wants it. I'm leaning towards against. He's not going to want that fight, but we'll see. The Terrence Crawford fight, the dream fight that everybody wants to see, I don't think it happens this year. And the reason why is, I truly believe because Crawford's top-ranked contract ends in May, right? So, in October. I'm sorry about that. It ends in October. So, if that contract ends, I don't believe there's enough time to finalize and promote the fight between Crawford and Spence like the promotions are, like the PBC is going to want to. And I don't think now PBC and Top Rank are going to get together for the fight. I just don't see it. I don't see them working out a deal. I wish they would, but I don't think they will. So, excuse me. So, Errol Spence, #3, the #1 welterweight in the world. Now, here's where people are going to get crazy. #2, for me, is the undefeated welterweight champion, Terrence Crawford. Now, people are going to go, how is Crawford ahead of him pound for pound, but not at welterweight? And again, I got to tell you, just like what you said, pound for pound covers multiple divisions, not one division. I look at pound for pound as what you've done in multiple divisions, if you've done anything in multiple divisions. Triple G hasn't fought in another division, and he's on the pound for pound list, but that's because against the pound for pound king and all the guys that Triple G beat that have moved up and come down, and he's been in a ring with Canelo, and probably, a lot of people thought he should have beat him at least one of those two fights. A lot of people thought he won both fights. So, you could very much argue that Triple G would be #1 had he fought him. But when it comes to these two guys, because again, I think this is going to create some controversy between Crawford and Spence. Crawford has fought at lightweight and was the #1 fighter there when he moved up in weight. He fought at junior welterweight, 140. He became the undisputed champion there. And he hasn't just beaten, he hasn't fought the same kind of fighters at welterweight and maybe the big names overall that Spence has. I'll agree with that. But he's fought so many good to decent fighters overall throughout all 3 weight classes, and not just beat them, dominated almost every one of them and knocked out most of them. Crawford to me, and become the undisputed champion in the division. That's such a hard thing to do, and he dominated his way to do it. He really, really dominated his way to do it. He was a unified champ at 140, and he fought Indongo, who had beaten, who did he beat? Edward Troyanowski, and then he unified by beating Cure Relic, Ricky Burns, I'm sorry. Indongo did. And Crawford went out there and destroyed Indongo, body punch on a 3rd round knockout to become the undisputed champ at 140 before he moved up to 147. To me, that still is a bigger deal pound for pound. And he has been champion here. It's not his fault he doesn't get the right kind of opponents to fight him. But he is beating decent fighters, just some might be past their prime or some haven't hit the big time yet, like the Mean Machine, Gurowskis or whatever his name was, and the other, what's his name? The Benavidez brother, but he had highlight reel knockouts against those guys. Crawford, in my opinion, overall and pound for pound, you can't discount him And for me, he's still number 2. Lomachenko moved out of it when he lost to Lopez, and I don't think Lopez has done enough to be in the top 5. So, one win over Lomachenko in a very close fight. I don't think that warrants Lopez a top 5 spot. So that's why he didn't make it. But Crawford moved up from 3 to 2, and I think he's deserving right here of the number 2 position. But number 1, without a doubt and with a bullet, is Canelo Alvarez, the unified super middleweight champion. Canelo, again, pound for pound. What does that mean? That most of the time covers multiple weight classes. It doesn't have to. If you shut down a division and beat a lot of really good, great fighters like Errol Spence and Triple G have, you're deserving of being pound for pound too. But Canelo's done it the true pound for pound way. He's won title. He unified belts at 154. He's unified belts at 160. He moved up to 175 and captured the light heavyweight title. And he's now a unified champion for his 3rd different weight class. And Canelo's still young, and he's going to do more. So, Canelo is just the man. And ever since the Triple G fight where, even before that, he beat good, really, really good fighters. Cotto, Austin Trout. That's just the 2 off the top of my head. But he beat some good, credible fighters. But, and hung in there with Triple G that first fight. Again, I thought it was a draw. I thought Triple G started slow in that fight and gave away too many of the early rounds. And then I had Canelo winning the last 2 rounds of that fight, which made it 6-6 in my book. But I don't mind Triple G winning that first fight to most people. I really don't mind that. But the rematch was razor thin and close, and he dictated the pace, and he landed body shots that slowed Triple G down a little bit. And Triple G outlanded him by like 20 to 30 punches, but Canelo was landing the better shots, the bigger, harder shots. Triple G was landing the more accumulation, like the boom, 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 but not the hard pounding shots that Canelo was landing. But it was razor thin. It could have went either way. I personally, I didn't score that fight because it was too damn close to call, and I was rooting for the fight across the board. So again, it really could have went either way. But I really don't mind anybody scoring it any way. But either way, Canelo got the win over what many believe was the pound-for-pound best fighter in Triple G at the time. So that was huge. Went on to unify belts against Danny Jacobs. Danny Jacobs, a blown-up Danny Jacobs, who gave up $1 million so he didn't have to weigh in right for that fight. And Canelo still dictated the pace and beat a bigger man in Jacobs, who purposely came in the day of the fight overweight. He didn't want to weigh in under the IBF regulations. That's the real story behind it. Don't let people fool you and tell you that Canelo played with Danny Jacobs' weight. No, he didn't. That's just not a fact. There's an IBF rule that says you cannot weigh, after the weigh-in, which was 160, you cannot weigh more than 10 pounds over the actual weight the next day. The day of the fight, you cannot weigh over 10 pounds. So that's 170. Daniel Jacobs purposely came in and did not fight for the IBF title when he fought Triple G because he wanted to avoid this rule. He came in over 180 pounds the day of the fight against Triple G. That's what he did. He's done this before. He purposely didn't come in on weight against Canelo and gave up his IBF title because he didn't want to make the weight. So that's the facts. Then Canelo goes out and knocks out clean Sergey Kovalev. Moved up to light heavyweight to do it. And he didn't play with Kovalev's weight either. I thought he was going to play with his weight, and he didn't. He came in right at the weight, which is 175. I think Canelo weighed 174. He did not make Triple G cut weight. Where Canelo did, I agree, maybe play with it a little, is he forced Kovalev to fight him on 10 weeks' notice after a tough fight that Kovalev had with Anthony Yarde. But hey, Kovalev knew that going into the fight with Anthony Yarde. He knew the Canelo fight was on the table. So, and he knew when they were going to fight. So, it is what it is, But Canelo still did not fuck with his weight, and he kicked his ass. Well, not kicked his ass. It was a good competitive fight against a Hall of Fame fighter in Kovalev. Knocked him out. Then he comes down to 168 this past December. takes on the number 1 fighter at 168. Callum Smith, undefeated. Won the World Boxing Super Series a couple years ago. Beat the previous number 1 fighter, George Groves. Knocked him out clean. Won the tournament. Has been avoided since because of how tall he is and how long he is. I myself thought it would be competitive. Somewhat. That Canelo was going to win a clean decision, but not the one-sided ass whipping that he won. And Canelo went out there and just put into work and dominated. And, I like Canelo, of course. He's my favorite fighter, but he's not my favorite fighter because of any other reason of the fact that he fights the best fighters and he beats the best fighters and he beats them clean, and also because he's a humble guy. That's why I like Canelo a lot. He's a humble guy that doesn't talk a lot of shit, and he just goes out there and wants to fight and wants to put in the work, and he wants to bring in the fans. He cares about the sport of boxing. He cares about the fans, and he wants to be impressed. He wants to be impressive. He doesn't just do it just for the money, but he makes a shitload of money. He does. And in my opinion, he's a great example of the figurehead that we need of boxing right now. He's in his prime. He's dominating. He brings in a big fan base from Mexico and worldwide. He's a huge name fighter. He makes a lot of money, brings in a lot of attention and viewers, and he's going to do that for the next few years to come. So Canelo right now, though, at the top of his game, and absolutely the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world. No doubt. You can't really argue anybody else. You can try to argue Crawford, but when you look at the resumes and who Canelo's fought and beaten against who Crawford's fought and beaten, it's not even close in terms of the resumes and it's not Crawford's fault, but he's just not ahead of Canelo. You can't argue Errol Spence. He hasn't done enough like Canelo has, for as long as Canelo has. And Canelo's done it in 4 divisions to 1 division for what's his name. So I'm sorry, you just can't argue that. Triple G, well, Canelo got the win. You want to argue that? Canelo got the win. And Usyk, again, just another guy that just hasn't done as much. But that's it, guys. Canelo Alvarez, number 1 pound for pound. And I really enjoyed doing this one. This one is exciting to talk about the biggest names in boxing. I hope you guys take the time to check it out because it's all worth it. And like my page, show me some love. Subscribe to my channel. I'd really appreciate it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Top 5 pound for pound 2021. True boxing. You've been hit with the truth.